Howdy folks, welcome to Beekeeping 101. I'm your host Gary, the owner of the Bee Place. We're here today to help you get some basic information and help you get started taking care of bees. I want to tell you we're part of what we consider a very fun and educational program called the Texas Master Beekeeper Program. We invite everybody to take part. It's a program put on by Texas A&M, the Texas Apiary Inspection Service, based up in College Station. There's several levels, and there's a lot of fun information available to the general public. Whether you ever decide to go take an exam and become a master beekeeper or not, you still have access to the same information that everybody that takes the exams has. It's linked on our website. Just go to the education page and scroll down. You'll find links to that, as well as some other great stuff that we feel is important to know about honeybees. I'd like to say that we appreciate everybody taking a class and getting more education before you take your bees home, or even if you've already got your bees home, you just want some more education and more information about keeping bees alive, safe, and happy and healthy. I'd like to mention that if you come to the Bee Place to hear an expert about honeybees, you're at the right place, but you're about 500 years too early. We have a lot to learn, everybody. I think this is a journey that we're all going to take together, and we'll have a lot of fun. I'm hoping that some of you folks will take a path that I haven't had a chance to explore and maybe come back and teach me a few things. I'm blessed to have had some uncles that had bees when I was a kid, so I was exposed to honeybees at an early age. I didn't continue as a beekeeper for years. I moved away and didn't really have a place to keep bees. But I moved back to San Antonio and started gardening and didn't really see the wild bee population I thought would be ample to have a proper fruit set. So I told my wife I'd like to get a couple of hives of bees, and I figured I could do that for about $100, and boy was I wrong. Things have changed over the years. The price of bees have gone up. The price of everything has gone up, obviously, but we got a couple of hives and made a major difference in our own fruit and our vegetable production, but as not just our own, but our neighbors as well. So it's nice to have bees in the community, and part of the reason Texas now allows honeybees to qualify for agricultural exemption on properties is because we don't have near the population of bees in the wild we once did, and this is by and large part to what's called a varroa mite. If you're not familiar with varroa mites, by the end of this session you'll know quite a bit about them. I intend to spend at least an hour in length talking about varroa and other pests of the hive, but we'll come to that later. First off, I want to get you started off talking about a little bit about safety first, because that's very important. Everybody needs to know how to protect themselves in case you come across Africanized bees by chance, or even if your own honeybees get a little bit aggressive with you, depending on circumstances. One of the things that can cause bees to get a little bit upset would be another pest of some sort, whether it be a honeybee trying to get in and steal some of their honey. Everybody wants some liquid gold. We personally do not produce a lot of honey, but we enjoy honey as well as the next guys, so we do make some honey. But our focus is more on teaching classes and teaching folks how to take care of bees and doing some crop pollination for some of the farmers, as well as selling bees and getting people started in beekeeping. So I know from experience that there's a lot of things that would like to get in this box and get them some free honey. So we do what we can to protect the hive and allow the bees to protect the hive. And one of the fun things that I think is neat is it's kind of an inside joke around some of the bee yards is what type of bee you have. Some are lazy bees, and some folks think that if you feed your bees it makes them lazy, which is not quite the truth. Bees they're like us. They have to have food. They have to have water. I like to share the fundamentals. My philosophy about beekeeping is not to teach you what to do, how to keep your bees, but to provide you the information that you need to know to make your own basic beekeeping management decisions. In other words, I don't want to tell you what you have to do. I want to tell you what I have learned that works for me and what I've learned that works for others based on different circumstances, different environmental conditions, etc. And then you can apply these things, and as well as whatever else you can find and learn about bees to your own situation. One of the things we do is we leave our entrances really small. A lot of folks make the mistake of opening up their entrance, pulling the entrance reducers out, and it makes it a lot more difficult for a young or small colony to defend the hive. Even a large colony in a large situation can get robbed on. Honeybees will get robbed by other bees. They'll also get something like a mouse or even other types of insects will get in the hive and try to get some free honey. With that said, I'd like to talk a little bit more about protective gear and share with you what we like to do as far as keeping a veil, at least at the very minimum, a veil handy. Just to share with you some information about why a veil is important, why not a full body suit. Hopefully you're going to have bees that are not super aggressive. We sell really gentle bees. In fact, we like our Italian and our Carney lines. The Carniolians are a very gentle bee. Some say you kind of have to make them mad before they'll sting you, and I kind of agree with that. There are days, there are circumstances you don't just walk up and pop the lid off a hive without putting some smoke on it, or you were going to probably pay a price. Bees, as a good friend Randy Oliver will say, are very patient teachers. They will let you know every time you mess up. They'll zap you. They'll remind you, hey, you did something wrong. Maybe you're moving too fast. Maybe you didn't use a little bit of smoke to calm the hive by smoking the entrance is what we normally do, and I'll share more about that later. But the thing is, protection is paramount. I would hope that nobody gets stung in the eyes or the ears or nose and gets turned off by bees immediately. The thing is, if you protect yourself, you can focus more on learning about bees than worrying about yourself getting stung. I like to also mention that bee venom is very beneficial, so even if you do get stung, it's not the end of the world. It's kind of like stepping on a grass burr or getting a splinter. It's going to hurt for a few minutes, and it's, depending on where you get stung, it may last a little longer. Early on in your beekeeping journey, you will probably swell a bit, some more than others. I've seen and had my own eyes swell shut by getting stung between the eyes, and it swells up and to the point to where you can't even see. It's possible that could happen to you, so wearing protection is advisable. But learning to work your bees to where you don't cause them to sting you is even more advisable, in my opinion. I think if you take your time, you will learn to wean yourself off of wearing gloves and a veil, but in the beginning, it's a good idea to have them, and especially if you're going to go through an entire hive and do a full inspection. If you're just going to open the lid, maybe feed them and check them, make sure your queen's there, you're probably not even going to have gloves and a veil, but I'll share with you some of the things we use. The gauntlet glove veils are pretty common. They're the most popular that we use and sell. Me and my guys all wear them. They're full sleeve gloves. This material is very similar to the pants that I like to wear when I'm taking care of my bees or working with my bees. They're the fishing pants. You can get them at Academy for 25 bucks a pair. They make a more expensive version, but not much difference really. But the material is something bees don't really light on. And even if they do, they can't really feel you. It's loose, like the pants. They're very loose and airy. They're very cool. They dry fast if they get wet. There's a lot of advantages to these versus wearing, say, for example, blue jeans in the yard. I don't wear blue jeans in the bee yard because bees can feel you through your jeans, and jeans tend to be a little snugger normally. And you'll get stung through your jeans a whole lot faster than you will through some of these fishing pants like I wear. Light colors are best. I mean, it's possible that they'll sting you through your shirt, or light or dark, but wearing light colors is advisable. A simple veil and a hat combo is typically fine, especially working with gentle bees. This is what we call the veil hat combo. It's got a sewn-on hat so that bees can't accidentally get in. If you get bees riled up, they may try to get in every crack and crevice. This particular design is even used for Africanized bee work, so they're basically a very full functional veil. You tie this around you, pull your cord up. There's a couple of versions of these. This is the preferred one by most folks. Pull it up, tie it. That's what the string is for. You just tie a simple loop around yourself, and then you could even put a long sleeve shirt on over this if you prefer, or you can put you can wear a short sleeve shirt and just the long gloves for starters. But a good veil is nice to have handy, even if you're not wearing it, because you never know, something could happen to cause the bees to get upset. At least keep one close by, keep it in the vehicle or close in your bee box, your cart that you're going to take your supplies out to the bee yard with you. For those that may not be aware, this is a new product we have now. It's a bee belt. It's got a nice place to put a marking pen, and if you want to write some notes on the lid or the underside of the lid. It's got a little queen cage that if you want to catch your queen and keep her safe while you're going through your hive, it's an option. But more importantly, this is the selling point of this tool. these hive tools, which is kind of your main tool in the bee world, I have yet to find a company that sells these without invisible legs and wings. They just seem to disappear very often. But the good news is there is a detection device that will help locate these. It's called a riding lawnmower. Or a flat tire will usually tell you where you left your hive tool. But be aware, they're very, very sharp. When they first come out of the package, they're sharp enough to cut through these leather gloves. I wanted to point that out. That's very important. The jackets do not have a place to put your hive tool. The full suits have a pocket that is designed for your hive tool, but these are a little bit too long to sit in a shirt pocket or pants pocket. They get top heavy, you bend over, you wind up losing it. Normally when I can't find mine, I go back to the last hive I worked on it. It's sitting on the side somewhere, but these little belts are really nice. Again, they've got the little pouch for your marking device, but they give you a place to put your hive tool, and you get in the habit of putting it right back here, and you always know where that is. It has a magnet, keeps it tight, so it's right there. You're going to use this hive tool working your bees and working your hive very frequently. In fact, the red paint won't even last very long. This is just brand new out of the box. In a week at my house or in my bee yard, this paint will pretty much be gone. With that said, this will actually fit over the top of your jacket or bee suit nicely. So these are handy. I think they're like less than $100 for one of these, custom made by a company up in Canada, and all the proceeds go donated all to one of the big bee research programs. So nice little addition to your toolbox. If it's of interest, let me know. We'll get you guys information about getting one. I like a jacket with a veil combo for just simple work. If we're moving bees at night, I may put on a full suit, but this jacket combo is very handy. It's a ventilated jacket. Let's see if you can see through it. You can see that it's got a netting and it's got a web in the middle of a material that is wider than the width of the bee's stinger. So the bee can't reach you through that web and that material to sting you. That's not to say that you can't press a bee into you, or if you get one in the crook of your arm or behind your knee if you're wearing a full suit and bend down or press up against something, you can push a bee through here. So if you're highly allergic to bees, these are not sting proof, but I have yet to find anything that is. In fact, these are the closest thing to being sting proof that's on the market to my knowledge. There's a couple of versions of this, a couple of different brands, but the ones that we handle that Man Lake brings in are as good as you need. I don't see any reason to spend the extra $100 to get the fancier suit, but that's up to the individual. These zip all the way up nicely. When you put this on, zip the zipper first, then you bring the hood over. I'll show you a little trick and won't even charge you extra for it. I put a safety pin right here. Hopefully you can see that all right. That safety pin keeps my zipper from going way in the back, so I don't have to try to struggle to find it, especially if I'm getting in a hurry. If I get stung and the alarm pheromone goes out after a bee stings you, and 2 or 3 more start trying to get up in my face, I can get my veil over my head and I can reach my zippers really quick. And I can get covered up and protected very fast. If I don't have those safety pins there, it's a struggle. And I would consider putting a stitch there, but these come off, the whole hood comes off when you want to wash it. So there's your jacket, there's your hood. This is pretty much all you need. If you're really worried about getting stung, then you could get a full suit, and it's a full jumpsuit. They're just a little bit more cumbersome to get in and out of, but they offer a lot more protection. And in fact, in the heat of summer, I've gotten to where I actually like these better than, it's cooler for me to work in one of these if I'm going to work bees all day. Most of you are not going to be working bees 8 hours a day like we do, but in the event that you want to stay a little cooler, you could just have on a pair of shorts, cutoffs, or whatever, strip down to your skivvies, and put this on, and it's light and airy. The air can get through, and it's well ventilated. You're not going to have heat stroke in South Texas in the summertime with this thing on like you would a poly cotton suit. So I highly advise getting into a ventilated suit if you're going to wear a suit or a jacket. One of the other things that you want to do is, if you ever get caught without a veil or jacket, or if you know someone, and one of the things I share with the volunteer fire departments and such, if they get a call and somebody's getting attacked by bees, get in a vehicle and get the windows up and the air on. If you don't even have to have air conditioning, but it really helps. If you get inside that enclosed cavity of your vehicle the pressures are different, the temperature is different, the surroundings are different, and they're things that a bee is not used to. The ones that are on you or clinging to your jacket or whatever, or even if we're just working bees and we want to take a water break and we've got bees around us and they follow us in the vehicle, we can roll up the windows, roll them back down about this far, get a little bit of space where the bees can crawl out. The bees that are on you or around you will immediately want out. It may take about 2 minutes, and you can almost set your watch by it. By the end of 2 minutes, every bee that came in is going to be out. They'll find those windows, they'll find the cracks and crevices. There may be one or two on the front window that will eventually find those windows to get out. And the bees on the outside will not come in a space that small. If it's wider, they probably will, but if it's just that narrow, depending on how upset they are, of course, but if it's that narrow, they're not going to come in, and the bees in can get out. So that's a really nice safety feature to know, a nice little thing to tuck in your back pocket and save that bit of information for the future. You'll enjoy it. As far as other protective gear is concerned, as far as the rest of my bee suit, I'll wear a pair of rubber boots and put my bee suit. It's got elastic bands. You can put some rubber bands around it that'll keep any bees from crawling up and getting inside your pants leg. Bees crawl up. It's a natural thing. If they were to fall out of a tree or whatever, they have to crawl back up the tree. Young bees, if they're really young, they have probably never even used their wings to fly, and they'll crawl up. It's as a natural way to do things. So always tuck your jacket, shirt, whatever it is. Make sure everything is tucked in and your belt is tight, because if something gets on your leg and starts crawling up, it'll get on the outside of your jacket instead of crawling up through your jacket. These are just some things that I've learned from experience. Again, I don't want to share everything and tell everybody where all the speed bumps are, because that'll take some of your fun out of learning about bees and doing some things on your own. But you probably won't remember everything I'm telling you today anyway, but I think it's important to share some of the things that may discourage folks. That, there's a lot of people that want to have bees but will not have them because they're afraid to get stung. So we'll share some things about taking care of bees and working with bees that prevent them from wanting to sting you, and that may kind of ease that burden in some people's minds. Honeybees are very protective of their babies and their food and their home, just like we are. I like to tell folks when we do our speaking engagements, we put a booth out at the rodeo as the Alamo Area Beekeepers Association has a booth at the San Antonio Stock Show and Rodeo every year, and I try to volunteer several days if I can. If I have time, I do even more. We like to get out there and share with the public all we know about bees and help them overcome some of the preconceived notions and some fears about honeybees. One thing I like to share is when you see bees out in the field, especially the youngsters, most are not afraid of them, but some people are just scared to death because they don't want to get stung. Maybe they were stung by a wasp at one time, or possibly a honeybee, but most likely if they've been stung by something before, it was usually a wasp. And while wasps have their place and they're very beneficial, a lot of people, they get a bad rap. People think they're not that good and we don't need them, and that's not the case at all. But the point is, honeybees and wasps, when they're out on flowers and doing their thing, it's like us when we're shopping at the grocery store. We're out looking for food. If there's a ruckus on the next aisle over, there's a pretty good chance we're going to ignore that ruckus because we've got our job to do. We're out shopping. We're doing what we need to do. And the bees are the same way. Now, if you come banging on the hive, that's like somebody coming to your house and banging on your window at 4 in the morning. You're probably going to get out the shotgun. And if they don't go away, you may even use the shotgun. Fire a warning shot. Bees will do that too. They will give you a warning. Most of them will headbutt you. They'll bump you. If you don't get away, they want a safe distance from the hive. If you don't get what they figure is a safe distance, and it's all different, not every hive is the same, then they may go ahead and use their stinger. They don't really want to sting you. It's not in the bee's best interest to sting you. They know they're going to die, or I believe that they have a sense that they may not, survive, but to the bee, it's worth it. It's a sacrifice they're willing to make to protect their young and their food and the colony. One of the things that I think is important to know is that bees are like a super organism. And as far as the bee's loss, if losing one bee was detrimental, bees would not have survived 1,000,000 years, because bees they're vulnerable. They're little. They're tiny. Things happen to bees, but they're a super organism, and it's much like, if a bee is lost, it's much like our hair and fingernails. It's fast in its replacement. It doesn't take long. The queens are going to lay a couple of thousand eggs a day in the prime season. And so at those numbers, it doesn't take long to replace a lost bee or two. So when you're working with your bees and you're putting your lid back on, if you can't get them all to go in and you accidentally squish a bee, it's not the end of the world, as long as it's not the queen. Make sure you don't squish the queen. She's valuable. She has to be there. We'll share more about that. But the next thing I like to let folks know, as far as getting their hives and getting them home, they're going to come in a hive like this, or maybe you bought a nuke from us. If you bought a nuke or getting a nuke from us or someone else, it may come in a box like this, or a wooden box similar to this but smaller, and it's going to have your bees inside. This particular box snaps closed. I advise handling them by the corners, because the middle is where you open it. So if you're grabbing it like this, you may accidentally open it. So grab them by the corners. It's very sturdy to handle by the corners. They're full of frames that the bees will live on, and we'll talk in depth about the frames. These frames are going to be covered with bees and honeycomb and waxed with larvae and honey and food and so forth. So they'll have a little bit of weight to them. They're going to weigh 20, 30 pounds, maybe more. And they're going to be stackable. If you bought several, you can stack them on top of each other. They've got doors that close. This door goes down and snaps closed. It's a little bit tricky to get used to how to close these, but once they're snap closed, they're pretty good. Bees cannot really get out of here very easy. On a hot day, if this plastic gets really soft, there's a crack that they could potentially, 1 or 2 bees may get out. But if they're in a cavity of a car, again, they're going to want out the window. Really, they want back on the brood nest more than anything else. They want to get back in the nest. They're not going to come boiling out of this thing. Even if you were to open the door, they're not going to come boiling out looking for a fight. They're basically going to look for a place to go get food, water, etc. When they come out of a hive after being cooped up for a while, which they will be when you come pick them up, they're going to do an orientation flight, learn where they live, and go get some food and water and come back and share with the colony. But the thing is, when you get a hive of bees like this, they'll be closed up and contained, and they're safe to travel inside the truck or in the back of a truck or car or SUV, what you have. I mean, it doesn't really matter, because they're going to be contained. If 1 or 2 bees are on the outside, we'll brush them off before you get them in the car. I will get into this box here in just a moment, but before I do, move this out of the way. I would suggest get yourself a flashlight. This one is made by Nebo. It's called the Slide King. It has a white light, but it also has red. And bees don't see red. Most animals can't see the red spectrum, so I can do things at night with my bees with a red light, and I can see what I'm doing, but the bees don't come at this light. They will fly at a white light, just like a moth. And so if you want to do some things at night, like maybe feeding your bees, especially if it's hot summertime, it's a lot cooler at night. I can go out and feed 15 or 20 hives at night without even putting a veil on. Just get my smoker and open the lid, feed them, go to the next one. They barely pay attention to me, and the red light allows me to see. I even use a type that you can wear on a hat, like a miner's light that has the red spectrum or yellow. Those work very well. A little trick of the trade, tip from the expert, so to speak. The other thing you're going to have is a hive tool and a smoker. These are your main tools. Two of the only real tools that you're probably ever going to need in a bee yard is a hive tool and a smoker. Occasionally there's some other hive tools. There's a frame grip and a frame perch. They're handy, but they're not necessary. These two are necessary. The hive tool separates things that the bees are going to glue it all together. So you're going to need that to separate the frames, the boxes, the lids, and so forth. But now let me get into the hive. If you bought one of these full hives from us, they won't have the super on it. This is called a honey super. This is called a deep brood chamber. This is technically, it's a 9 5/8 and a 6 5/8 box. They're referred to as supers normally, but some people also use deeps for supers, so it could be a little confusing. And if you know for sure that you want a medium-sized box, instead of saying I want a honey super or calling a supply company or us, make sure you identify it as a medium 6 5/8 or a deep 9 5/8, so just to make sure you get the correct size, either frames for that box, that size box, or for the box itself. But they'll be strapped together with a ratchet strap. Don't use a cam buckle strap. Those things are not as secure. You need something very secure, because the only thing that holds your bee boxes together besides the glue they use is gravity. So we use a secure strap like this. Bungee cords are not a good idea. They're too liable to come apart. You can, once you unbuckle this, now it's free to move around. So I'm gonna take this apart and show you the basics of the beehive. I'll start off with the lid, or the cover. This is a top cover. It's called a telescoping top cover, because like a telescope. It goes all the way around on the outside. This is a plastic covered, plastic protective coating that is meant to be taken off immediately. They all come with this. It just keeps them from getting scratched up during transport. And you can start at one corner and peel until you get the whole thing off. I don't recommend leaving this on out in the sun, then it's going to be very hard to get it off. When I'm working my bees, I just get in the habit of putting this right out in front of the hive. This is going to keep you from standing in the runway, so to speak. Bees are wanting to come in their house, and next thing you know, you're going to have a bunch of bees on your back trying to get in, or upset because they can't get in. The top cover is always paired with an inner cover. This inner cover has a hole in it for ventilation and also for condensation. It's got the inner cover has got the woodware flat to where you can use your hive tool to separate it. When the bees glue it together, you put your hive tool in here, you crack the seal. If you do not have that, this will get glued down, and there's no good place to get this without tearing up your boxes or without scratching up your paint job. So always put your inner cover on before you put your top cover. And you do not want to put your inner cover down here or underneath a feeder or anything else unless you have a way to prevent the bees from getting up here and gluing your top cover down. With that, all of your boxes are going to have frames in them. There's about 4 or 5 different styles of frames. We like these plastic foundation. They're wax coated. They have the perforation, the stamped out the cell size for the honeybees to make their honeycomb on. This is the 6 5/8, the small size. They make them in black or yellow, or natural they call it. The black ones are a little bit easier to see the eggs on, but if you're putting it in a top box that you're going to use exclusively for honey, that doesn't really matter. Word to the wise, this black foundation will warp very, very easily in a hot sun, so don't ever take one out and leave it out where the sun can get on it and come back in about 5 minutes and it'll be wavy and warped and it won't function very well. If this had bees in it, obviously these would all be glued full of bees and stuck down. I take my hive tool and separate them, make myself some room so I can get my first one out. They'll be covered in wax. This one is just getting started to get some wax on it. We call it, what it's called is drawn out. They draw out the wax. You're going to have wax on all of these and they'll be covered with bees. They'll be blank in the beginning. As the bees bring in resources and start to fill them out, then they'll put the wax on them and then they'll start storing honey and eggs and larvae and such as that in there. A lot of people get caught up with queen excluders. A lot of beginners, and one of the first things they want to do is put a queen excluder on a colony. I would recommend waiting until the 2nd year before you ever even worry about a queen excluder, because what you can possibly do is you can eliminate the queen from getting up into the top box in the wintertime if you don't remember to take it off, and she may starve to death if the colony moves up to get to the food that they've consumed everything in the bottom. Next thing you know, everybody's up top, but the queen can't go with them. She can't fit through these spaces. This is a pre-designed size that the bees can fit through, but the queen, because she's a little bit larger, she can't fit through here. A young queen, a virgin queen, or an Africanized queen can possibly fit through there, but a regular mated, fully functional queen cannot. Then you have here, you have your deep box, which is normally your brood nest. We'll use 2 of these as they grow and expand and fill it up. I have a feeder that I like to use, these internal feeders. It's basically called a cap and ladder system. This whole inside is hollow. These are basically little ladders that allows the bees to crawl up and down to get to the syrup. They'll fill this up with syrup, and as they use it down, the bees can go all the way to the bottom on this, and believe it or not, they can get almost every last drop using this system. They're held together with these bands, pretty simple system. And then inside here I have a couple of different types of frames, mainly for display, but also just to illustrate. This is a plastic frame with plastic foundation, all one piece. This is our regular wooden frames with the removable wax-right plastic. These basically bow bend and they fit in the top grooves. It's a little groove here, top and bottom. This snaps in one side, you bend it just a little bit and it snaps in the other side. And it holds it in place. While you're checking your hive, you can turn it up, down, whatever, and the honeycomb's not gonna fall off. If you use just natural, be very careful, because in a hot day that wax gets very soft, and if you tilt it, It could fall out. Next thing you know, you have a mess on your shoes. So again, they offer black or natural. This is what they look like raw. This is what they look like after the bees have been working on them. They've got honeycomb on them. They store everything in here, their whole entire everything. This is like their cabinet system. Every single cell in here will have a use, whether it be for brood or food, babies and larvae, depending on the stage and development of the colony. In the beginning, there's not anything on here. As they start to build it out, the queen will start to lay in here, and then as the season goes, typically starting in the spring, the colony is going to go build up. As they build up, they'll fill this up, and the eggs and larvae, the nest portion will move down, and then the food will be primarily at the top. You will add a second box as needed. I like to say when it gets about 75 to 80% full of bees, when the corners are still a little open, I'll give them another box on top. Again, honeybees need three basic things. They need food, water, shelter. They need a queen, and they need somebody to help them out with the predators or pests and the mites and things. So they consider this to be their hollow log, their hollow tree. And when they outgrow this space, or any space, when honeybees are in a hollow tree, or whether they're in a shed of a barn, or under a house, or in an old spare tire somewhere, I mean, you'd be amazed some of the places I've found and have removed bees from. But a lot of times they outgrow that space sooner rather than later based on the size of the space. And when they do, that's a signal for them to swarm, and that's how they reproduce. A honeybee swarm is approximately 75% of your colony. You don't want them to leave. You don't want your queen and the bulk of your bees to leave. So we do what we call swarm prevention by adding boxes and basically stretching their tree cavity, giving them more room to grow. I think we'll probably have a pretty good demonstration of that at the bee yard. When you come get your bees, you'll see some of our hives that are really tall. Another frame that is available is what we call a drone frame. This has a slightly larger cell size or pattern that they start to build in their cells on. Drones, the male bees, are a little bit larger, so they require a little bit larger space to develop in as a young baby. So we can put these in there that allows them to put their drones on, and it helps keep them from making a mess in the rest of the hive, because they will develop. This is not a good example. I mean, this one doesn't have any drone comb on it, so I probably should have one in here that does, just to show that if you don't have a drone frame in your colony, you're going to wind up with they have to make drones somewhere, so they'll start making them on the bottom of these, and oftentimes if they have a two-story hive, they'll be between the two. It's called ladder comb or drone comb. And they'll lay the drone eggs. The queen will lay drone eggs in the larger cells to develop drones, not for herself or this colony, but for the community. The queen that you have or that's in this colony, and there'll only be one per colony, she's already mated.